this time, I'd like to welcome on stage for our roundtable discussion, Digital Sustainability and Sustainable Infrastructure, our moderator from CWC and also CANTO Director, Ms. Melissa Sutherland. Please welcome her to the stage. And she will be joined by the Honorable Marcia Cadell, Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology from Barbados. A huge round of applause for the minister who has been doing amazing things down in Barbados, which we will hear about. And they will be joined by Carmine Sorrentino, VP, Chief Commercial Officer of Liberty Networks. Can I hear our after lunch? We have been fed. Applause. Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Madam MC. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us right after lunch. We are honored. We're hopeful to see many more persons coming in, but you're our team today, okay? So we're going to go through with you. As our MC, Rochelle Cameron, has introduced Minister Cadell and Carmine Sorrentino from Liberty Networks, we're going to talk about digital sustainability today and sustainable infrastructure. Carmine will speak a lot more on the infrastructure side of it. He'll be talking about subsea cable systems, something that some of us are aware of, but something that he will demystify for us today, why it's important and how we're making that infrastructure sustainable. And of course, Minister Cadell, who will tell us about what the government of Barbados is doing with regards to digital sustainability. If we have any time left, and we're trying to make up time here because we're running behind schedule, if we have any time left, we will take one or two questions from the floor. So you can start to think about your questions from now. I am going to start with Minister Cadell. Minister, we know sustainability is in vogue. Everybody talks of, there's certain buzzwords, sustainability, AI, ChatGPT, those things. But we want to understand better from you, how does the government of Barbados see digital sustainability? What is it all about for the government of Barbados?
Thanks, Melissa, and it's wonderful to be here and to talk about these important issues. I hope that the sustainability question is more than just in vogue. I had the privilege to address the breakfast session this morning, and I think one of the things that Hurricane Beryl reminds us, regrettably we have too many reminders in the region, is that the climate question, the sustainability question, is not new for the region. Yeah. And so let me start by saying a bit about how we frame sustainability in the Barbados context. A few years ago, I think it was around 2019, when I was Minister of Economic Affairs and Investment, we started a very important conversation about climate resilience, about what is the group of investments or activities, what are the interventions that are needed to bring about a climate resilient Barbados. And so we looked at sustainability and climate resilience across every sector in the country, and especially with respect to business continuity. So we looked at it in two ways. One is, if there is a severe weather event, so we know we're not just talking hurricanes, we're also talking sometimes extreme rainfall events. Barbados just had some extreme rainfall and flooding yesterday. If we have a severe weather event, how soon can we get up and running again? But overall, how are we building in ex ante sustainability into our infrastructure? So we have just approved by Cabinet a climate resilience plan that looks at that business continuity plan that sets targets. Dominica has done this as well. I think they were the first to come up with this kind of model for how soon do we believe our networks will be back up, how soon do we believe that our hospital will be back up and running, that schools will be ready. Digital infrastructure and digital capacity runs through all of that, but there's a special focus on connectedness post-disaster. We need it to respond to the disaster. People feel more secure when they know they can reach their loved ones, when they can get back to work, even if they have to do it online. And so we've set some very clear targets for that. But we also had plans, more long-term plans for things like undergrounding of networks so that they're less vulnerable to disaster. We also have to be very intentional about the new infrastructure that we're building out. And, you know, data centers, talking about buzzwords, Melissa, data centers are also becoming more and more desirable as part of our national infrastructure. But they are very high in energy needs. So we are countries that are heavily dependent on fossil fuels, that are now coming to terms with the notion of net zero by different target dates that we've set. So what do data centers mean for that conversation? And so in Barbados, we are really looking to create a blueprint for a sustainable data center, one that looks at a resilient energy mix, including, of course, renewable energy sources. Data centers, based on some of our research and based on some of our conversation, lend themselves very well to wave energy and other kinds of new energy technology. And so these are the conversations that we are having now as we build out the data center. So it is about resilient networks. It is about having governance mechanisms that respond very quickly. We have a wonderful model where, you know, we have our telcos at the table throughout the year to make sure that we are not just responding, but that we're planning. And so I think models that focus on the infrastructure itself, but also the governance mechanisms that allow us to respond quickly are part of the sustainability conversation.
Thank you, Minister Carter. Thank you. Another aspect of sustainability of infrastructure is with the actual subsea cables that we have that takes traffic from many of our islands. I'm going to allow Carmine to tell us who Liberty Networks is, what kind of infrastructure they manage, and why is it important. So Carmine, over to you to demystify subsea cables and to help us to understand why this is important in the grand scheme of everything, telecoms and sustainability.
Sure, thank you. So a little bit about Liberty Networks. I think many in the room knew formerly Liberty Networks as Columbus, after C&W Networks. May of last year, Liberty Latin America decided to rebrand the brand, relaunch the brand, Liberty Networks. And during the rebranding, of course, you know, we renew our commitment of investing in the region, announced investment for 250 million, 5 years. New infrastructure. As you know, our main infrastructure is subsea. We do own 50,000 kilometers of subsea systems and also around almost 20,000 kilometers of terrestrial fiber. Why is important the subsea? I mean, as we understand you in the Caribbean, but also in the rest of the region, I think that the subsea aspect of communication be one of the most important, right? The connectivity that today, and actually I think also worldwide, you may have heard about subsea system in the last 1-2 years, right? Not only in our region, but also in Europe, in the Middle East, and we heard a lot about that. Before the last 2-3 years, maybe people were less aware of that, but actually the 99% of our communication goes on subsea systems. So everything that we normally do in terms of connectivity is managed by subsea systems. So it's a connectivity that is vital for the ecosystem of each country. And actually, you know, we are happy to be managed such a big network, a sunset silent network in terms of connectivity and point of presence in the region.
Thank you, Carmine. So, Carmine, I understand that the subsea, especially for islands, the subsea cable actually takes all our off-island traffic and takes it to where it needs to go, and also allows us to get traffic from outside our countries into our countries,
Exactly.
and from inside the countries out. So without subsea cable, there is no communication.
Zero communication. All the international traffic that goes outside the islands or the other countries goes normally through subsea cable.
Right. Thank you, Carmine. And Carmine, what are we doing to make the whole management and even development of subsea cable sustainable? How does that fit into the sustainability mix, subsea cables?
Yeah, in generally, let me say, the subsea, if you see the subsea per se, it's like really eco-friendly infrastructure, right? If you compare it to other infrastructure. Of course, each subsea cable, as we were discussing about data centers, as its landing point in each country that is, that small data center where you manage the landing of the cable. In that case, for example, we have a lot of programs to try, to use alternative energy, as we were discussing. We're installing solar panels almost everywhere in our landing station. And we do also, it's not just that, but also when you see the batteries and all the other stuff that we use in the data center, we are going from, even if more expensive, but with the long-term investment that reduce, the use of that materials. In general, also I think the most important part related to that is also the diversify, right? I think in our networks, one of the most important part that we are able to manage most 18 systems, subsea systems, that they are interconnected between each other. And that part helps a lot in terms of managing, where the resilience of the infrastructure, where you want to manage the traffic, and where you want to put. If you wouldn't have that infrastructure and that ability to move things, that would be really difficult. That's why it's really important what the Liberty Networks does in the region.
Thank you, Carmine. Minister Cado, back to you. So, Minister Cado, we know that sustainability has its challenges in terms of investment, in terms of just the way people do business. And from the perspective of the government, what are the plans, what is the thinking about how to move companies from their existing business models into new business models that are more sustainable? Is there a path? Is there a way? Is there a program that looks at incentives for businesses to move along a path? And I love, Minister, what you spoke about, not just the technology, but the governance piece, the governance models. How then does the government intend to support companies that are having challenges just move into that space? What's the thinking around that?
Okay, that's about 4 questions.
Just thinking about
yes.
it.
So thanks for that. I'm glad you talked about business models and the financial sustainability part, because often when we talk about sustainability and resilience, we leave that part out. In this conversation about AI and digital transformation and everything that we're trying to do, I really want us not to repeat some of the mistakes of other global conversations and global engagement. I think that one of the mistakes that we made on climate is that we started having the financial conversation too late, and we treated the financing of climate resilience as if it were just an add-on, as if it were not a significant input to what we needed to do. And so I think we have to have a similar approach to digital sustainability. For many countries in the region with a severe debt overhang, with other competing development challenges, for us, the financing is central to the conversation. And what we find is that, how do we find new financial models that involve partnership with companies such that government doesn't take on its own balance sheet the full cost, but also the full risk for some of what we have to build. And so the financial sustainability question, finding new models for, I know we say public-private partnerships, but I think that that particular acronym kind of shrouds what we're looking at. We really have to try and find new build, own, operate types of approaches so that government doesn't have to build and own everything. Now, when it comes to data sovereignty, there are some things and some parts of that governments will want to own, especially as it relates to our own data. But I think that we need to get creative. Certainly, the government of Barbados has tried to do that. We have, for example, introduced natural disaster clauses into our debt, and we have been very successful with our advocacy to be able to encourage other countries and other and multilateral institutions to do the same. What that means simply is that if there is a severe weather event that would trigger the clause, we would have a moratorium on principal and interest repayments. In our case, for 2 years, in some cases that we're seeing now, perhaps for longer. That gives you the fiscal space to be able to invest, for example, in getting your networks back up and running. It gives you the fiscal space to respond and to rebuild without having to worry about meeting debt repayments. But to come to your question about incentives, which is a word that everybody likes to use, but that governments don't often like to hear, because an incentive, a concession, a waiver is a tax expenditure, right? It is a loss in revenue to small islands that are trying to make sure that we have a solid revenue base, especially with our shrinking populations. Shrinking population means shrinking revenue base. But we have sought to be creative with our fiscal incentives framework. And starting during COVID, we introduced a program for sustainable tourism, where we encouraged hotels, and we had we made certain investments in hotels that met certain criteria, including expansion of their digital transformation. So if you were a hotel on island that was actually investing in the upskilling of your staff with respect to digital skills, if you were investing in systems to make sure that your services and systems were more accessible online, that meant that you got a certain level of investment and consideration from the government. Similarly, in the budget this year, we also announced certain incentives for companies that were going to be established to advance digital transformation. And so that looks like like many different things, but we feel that this area of work, the behavior that we want to see, will very much be triggered by fiscal incentives. And so we've built out an entire fiscal incentives framework to encourage companies, not just existing companies, to transition to a more digitally nimble environment, but also to encourage companies who are building new tech, who will want to have access to compute for research and development, for the data that we are generating, to encourage those companies to come to Barbados, to work, to operate, to explore the data that we generate, to contribute to the products and services that they develop and offer, and we've built out an entire framework around that.
Thank you, Minister. That's very informative and interesting. We also like to talk about precedents, so we're glad that something exists. we have a basis for a conversation. Thank you for that, Minister. Carmine, back to you. So we all know about Hurricane Beryl. It's very fresh in our minds, and quite a few of our countries will have to recover from Hurricane Beryl. How did communications in the region hold up with the subsea cables operated by LN? Did it break? Did it hold? What happened?
I must say that the response was excellent. We had zero disruption on our subsea systems. There was great work that we have been done in all subsea system that would be impacted by the hurricane. Talking with the technical team, just to give you an idea what we did during that. There was some problem, one of the system which we rerouted in a fast way some traffic. We made sure that, for example, the night before the hurricane was hitting, all our landing stations were already on generators, because you may lose commercial power and you may have a little disruption. So we made sure that everything was already on generator to make sure. So practically also in zone where the power was not there, the subsea cable were still running and the communication was still running. So this is also thanks, as I was saying before, to the resilience of the infrastructure, the possibility that you have on switching from one cable to another in case of disruption. In this case, we didn't have the need, but it was a great effort. I mean, it's part of the experience that we have in the region, working more than 30 years in this region. So, this is an important aspect, and we need to make sure, coming back what the minister was saying, all this digital transformation, all the need, there is, I think, a huge opportunity in terms of economies in general coming from the digital, right? But what we need to take care on our side is that the digital highway is always there, right? And we do build digital highways. The subsea cables are highways. And, this is our job. And I'm happy that, with hurricane, we were able to keep everyone connected during a difficult time.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Carmine. Carmine, do you see any emerging risk? Do you see any emerging risk to subsea cables, to connecting our islands with the outside world from the climate change that is happening? Do we see any risk there? We feel that we're...
I mean, we don't see like risk. If you see, I mean, there's a geopolitical risk. You heard about subsea cable and security and someone that may go there and cut your subsea cables. So, without entering that discussion, I think what is really important is something that we are trying also to push with our government, and it's like the awareness of the subsea cable, right? More and more we have sometimes, disruption or cut because the yacht that is going to the island doesn't know that there is a subsea cable and they anchor right on the cable, right? And sometimes due to also the limitation that you have in some law, you are not able even to recover the damages, As you may know, so it's I think the important part is, since this is really vital infrastructure, we need to make sure everyone that there is awareness about that, and there is some specific law to make sure that people think twice or know really where they are anchored, where they are going with their ship or with their yacht, right?
Thank you, Carmine. So that's something that we can take forward, just to make sure that the awareness is there where the actual cables are, so there's no, it's a protected area.
Exactly.
And also in the regulations.
Exactly.
Thank you, Carmine, for that. Minister, back to you. You preempted me because I was going to ask you about data centers. What should they expect? What kind of time frames are we talking about? And those related verticals. So I know that you had already mentioned that the data centers use a huge amount of energy. Of course, we would love to say it, we heard it first at CANTO. So, Minister, we want to understand what kind of time frame should data center operators be looking at, even telcos in terms of their operations, so that, if we were not focused as much on that aspect, that we can begin to align with that agenda, or will it begin with a conversation?
So, having preempted you, Melissa, I'm going to help you a little bit by first returning to something that Carmine mentioned that I wanted to add to, which is that when it comes to our critical infrastructure in countries, we also have to protect critical infrastructure. And I dare say we have to protect critical infrastructure by law. We have to make it clear, I believe, that governments are serious about how we treat the infrastructure that is needed to operate our economies, to operate our social sectors, healthcare, education, etc. And we have done so by introducing new cybercrime legislation. That cybercrime legislation identifies what is a critical infrastructure, makes it clear that anybody who is in breach of the law with respect to that critical infrastructure is subject to some pretty stiff penalties. Now, a lot of the conversations that we have around new advances in technology are nudges. I don't know how many of us have read that book, Nudge, where a lot of what governments have to do in taking our countries along is just that. We have to have kind of gentle conversations sometimes and make friends and influence people and have that kind of approach. But at the same time, I think that we have to send clear signals that, cyber and the digital space is not esoteric. It is not abstract. It is real. And interfering there has real consequences for how we are able to run as a country for people's lives and livelihoods and so on. And so the cybercrime conversation has not been without its further conversation in the public domain, and we welcome that, and we've been having those conversations. But I think it's important to make sure that we identify, we name, we say what is our critical infrastructure. There's some parts of that infrastructure that countries choose not to say exactly where it is, in some cases, because of the risk that people will try to gain access. But I think there's a legislative side that we also have to invest in. We always say not everything is tax and spend. Some things are about creating the environment. With respect to Barbados' data center, I think the first thing to say with respect to the timeline is that we have to make sure we have good, clean, reliable, well-aggregated data to power or to be the platform for whatever are the AI applications that we're making. Because this question of data centers is really about distributing compute to run an industry, right? It's not just about storage. It's not even primarily about storage. It's about making sure that we have the compute capacity to create the kind of data and tech sector that we want. And so we are going to start with making sure that we know what our data needs are. The kind of data center that you build, how large it is, how modular it is, how the process by which you do it has to be led by the data needs. I know that sometimes we want to be able to move quickly, build big and fast, but really for our countries, I think we have to be guided by the purpose. How much data are we generating? And what does that mean for the data center needs that we have? And so without giving you a timeline, I will say that we have started and we are well on our way.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. One last thing I'd ask you, Minister, before I go to Carmine and we wrap up, is what can CANTO do? How can CANTO help with the policy agenda? How can CANTO get its membership together so that you have an avenue to reach so many stakeholders? So something to think about. And if you have a comment on it now, Minister, we would welcome it, because definitely that's something we can put on our agenda.
I think what you're already doing by using your convening power and convening capacity is very important. I think that getting us all together for conversations like this CANTO is unique. Bringing these actors together doesn't really happen in such a deliberate, intentional way in many other gatherings. We have lots of meetings, but I think that, I said in my brief remarks this morning that in our part of the world, we don't have the luxury of staying too separate between public and private. We have to develop partnerships for development that benefit all. And so I think already bringing us together to have practical conversations is very important. I think beyond that, there's a lot of advocacy globally that needs to be done. I think making visible the unique needs and positions of our countries is a tremendous mandate. I think of things, for example, like the UN Global Digital Compact, which is about to be signed in September, which seeks to set, in some ways, global rules for how we all continue or carry out our digital transformation. Organizations like CANTO that have the perspective of state and also private sector have a lot to bring to bear in that conversation. So I think the global policy discussion, the global advocacy, the conversations with the hyperscalers and big tech, that convening could possibly extend and make sure that we're having the right conversations with the right people.
Thank you, Minister Carter. Carmine, just the last question for you, which is just to say, what does the future of subsea cable look like? I know that there have been conversations across the region, some governments wanting to do their own subsea cable and so on. And just to talk just for about 5 seconds about how it is that what Liberty Network does is provides a sustainable framework for subsea cables.
Yeah.
In terms of the resilience.
Yeah. It's difficult, if you think about resilience, it's difficult to put 3 pieces that don't talk with each other and build something that is resilient, right? So when you have a different system, you can build a mesh network that allow you, as we were saying, to be resilient, because you can move, you have in your hand the possibility to move something from one place to another. Building is important. I think that, as we were saying, it's like building a new highway, you build a new subsea cable is important. How you manage it is even more important. It's not just the infrastructure for it, but the operation of the infrastructure. These are systems that may be in the water 30, 40, 50 years. So you need to plan really well. We were discussing before how important is the plan. What we bring is the fact that the possibility to manage all these systems, right? Give you a way to operate that is difficult to compare to any other system or linear system you may have somewhere else. And from there come, the resilience. And if you think about subsea cable, also to link a little bit to what the minister was saying, is there are a lot of things for the future. We're talking about compute, AI. We know that big AI data center will be most probably where there is a lot of energy, right? But the subsea also and the mesh network, the fact that you have a mesh network give you an important opportunity, that is to share. Thanks to that, you can share. You can have what people may call a compute federation, on which several lines they may share their compute. In order to do that, you need subsea cable, you need highways. So that is an important part of mesh network. You may have a service that you may share. I think, for example, for the Caribbean would be something really interesting because you can share, as we were saying, there's not a lot of power, commercial power that you can, put in huge data centers, so you need the plan. So I think it's really an important aspect, and the fact that you can add to that mesh network is really important. But as you can see, last December we announced a new subsea cable that actually is going to connect Colombia, Central America, Mexico, and the US. But we have other projects in the region, and we will continue to aggregate to our mesh network.
Thank you very much, Carmine. Minister Carter, thank you so very much. Thank you. Carmine, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our panelist, the Honorable Marcia Cattle, Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, Barbados, and Carmine Sorrentino, VP, Chief Commercial Officer, Liberty Networks. And thank you very much to our moderator, Melissa Sutherland Campbell. So on our digital journey, we've talked about education. We have heard from our women pioneering in telecoms. We've had a little music added in. And we just had a very important discussion on the infrastructure that is critical to us being able to provide seamless communication, the importance of the public-private partnerships, and the resilience of our networks to manage climate change and the various natural disasters that we are currently experiencing. From C&W, Charles Douglas, Senior Manager, Regulatory Affairs. Cable and Wireless Communications, my good friend Charles, who will be joined by Carol Robertson, Senior Business Development Partner and Caribbean Government Lead, CNW Business Regional. Hello, Carol. And by Shubh Singh, CEO, Newfields Technologies. And we're going to have the discussion, digital sustainability and health. Over to you, Charles.
Good afternoon, everyone. The pleasure is mine to moderate this panel, and I'm privileged to have industry experience, a practitioner, and also Carol, who puts together these solutions and projects with governments throughout the Caribbean. Just to set the stage on why this is an important conversation, research has shown that the Caribbean has among the highest rates of incidence of hypertension, diabetes, and other complications related to those illnesses. And among the leading cause of deaths is heart attacks and stroke and cancer and so on. The good side is a lot of these illnesses have risk factors that we can manage. Some of them relate to diet, health and exercise, others to alcohol abuse or so on, tobacco use. So what we'd like to seize the moment is to appreciate the role now of digitization, ICT, in creating sustainable economies, impacting the health sector in this particular instance, the difference it can make, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and that's how we would like to have the discussion. For the benefit of the audience, just to follow us, the idea is that we will look first at infrastructure, then we will move to hardware, look at ecosystem, consider software, then sustainability, and then have a wrap-up. So hopefully the audience will follow us, and that's the journey that we'll take. So Shubh, you being the CEO of Newfields Technology, you're in a particular advantageous place to tell us, do you think the Caribbean has the infrastructure to support sustainable health?
Yeah, and the quick answer is yes. I think infrastructure is something which the Caribbean does a pretty good job of. Of course, there's always room for improvement. And with cloud technology coming in, one of the things we see as we work across, because we work across the Caribbean on several islands, so people are always talking about how to leverage cloud technology, right? But overall, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of networking, connectivity, having PC infrastructure in place, connecting people, having server infrastructure, and having wide area networks and connectivity across them, that's something I think the telecom companies have a good handle on. And while there are some issues, but there's some room for improvement, by and large, I'd say there's a good foundation which we can build upon.
That's amazing. That's really, really amazing. Good news. Carol, anything you'd like to expand on that?
Certainly. I agree that from a technology standpoint, infrastructurally, we have come a long way from even 5 years ago. And the network is something, and we just heard the panel discussion prior to this about the infrastructure. And we've learned that there's a continuous evolution around that technology, constantly being improved and constantly responding to the demands. There was a discussion around, and COVID was mentioned a number of times, and it's become such a great reference point. But never did we see such a demand for data and access as we saw during the period of COVID-19. And it was said earlier that it was more precious to some people than even water and electricity. So, well, electricity to get it, but water. It was a major factor just to stay in touch, to get business done, to do transactions, and just basically to exist. So I think that will continue, because what is evident is that as we go forward, our dependency on connectivity will only continue to increase. And so far we've seen great demonstrations of the ability to maintain and to stay ahead of even that demand. So I definitely agree.
And one of the really interesting things is, as we work with different organizations and they're looking for solutions, so they always bring up this question, what if we lose the internet connectivity? And I think I've become one of the biggest proponents or supporters of the telecom industry, because I always tell them, well, how often have you actually lost it? Because the track record over the last few years has really improved a lot. And I can say across Jamaica, Trinidad, Nevis, and across a wide Guyana, and we've seen very few outages the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. That's also being complemented, yes?
Absolutely.
That's also being complemented by the seamlessness between which we switch between the fixed network and the mobile network. So that whole convergence there has also created an environment where things are so much more seamless and everything is more accessible, regardless of where you are.
No, awesome, and we are proud of that. Going forward, let me ask you to both gauge where you would say, generally speaking, across the Caribbean, where we are with the digitization of the healthcare systems. So no, you don't be overcommittal. You can give a range, if you will, because then it's against that backdrop that we will now have the subsequent conversation. So, Job, would you like to start?
Yeah, so healthcare digitization is a particularly challenging area. In fact, I founded Newfields Technologies about 10 years ago. And it's very interesting in terms of my life story. I was working on a large health system, the Obamacare platform. And there was a lot of issues across the country, across the US. Our platform was successful. And it was a very inspiring experience. And I walked out of a partnership in a large firm to found my own company. And one of my biggest goals was to bring healthcare digitization in underserved areas. So after a few years, we expanded across the Caribbean. So I think that's an area which remains challenging. And there's a lot of opportunity for digitization. Again, the base connectivity and the infrastructure is there. But in terms of creating true data, which is searchable, to which we can apply AI, creating patient records, I think there's a lot of space over there still.
I will get to that.
Yes.
Carol, your thoughts? You share his view?
What I would say is that there are definitely several forays into digitization of healthcare across the region. And it's basically needs driven, and it's a lot driven also by just general knowledge about options that are available for digitization of healthcare. So what I would have seen as I traverse the region and have these conversations are persons experimenting with different aspects, because as you can imagine, the whole concept of telehealth, just like every other industry, is not cookie cutter, and there are several components to it. To have a complete telehealth system can give you hundreds, literally, of different applications, different, as we would call them, use cases or business processes that you can digitize. And so what I see is that persons will choose one or be exposed to one and explore it.
So is it high or low?
So if you look at it in that spotty kind of way, it might be high. But in terms of a holistic system that addresses the needs of a complete end-to-end process, I would still say we're on the low side. All
right, clear. So what we're hearing is that we have the infrastructure, it's robust and reasonably reliable, but there's room for growth and expansion.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the ecosystem to make this all possible. So we said we would start talking on the hardware side. So who'd like to start?
I'll start. So on the hardware side, it's incredible. There's a lot happening. And so when we talk about hardware and we move from the infrastructure, and Shub talked about data, data has to live somewhere. So we automatically think about our data center environment. Where is that data going to be stored? The server infrastructure, and then the comms, the networking. And all of that, I think over the years, we've been doing a great job. The same infrastructure conceivably can support just about every industry. The same server environment, it's just the resources that you're using that's going to vary. So definitely, I believe that we are still ahead of the game there. We've been coming out with more price-effective platforms, simpler to maintain, etc. And so I think we're definitely in a good place where that is concerned. Now, if we traverse to, as I mentioned, the spotty part, where there's different applications, different use cases, business processes that you want to affect, there's a lot of hardware out there that is going to do a gamut of things. So we would have been exposed to the digital cameras that will allow you to do dermatology, remote dermatology, remote retina examinations, the ears. stethoscopes that you can remotely listen to the heartbeat, listen to the lungs. And so we would have gone through that and been exposed to that in a specialist environment. So not just a camera that you can see stuff, but with great resolution that a specialist who knows what they're looking at for a second level consultation can make a diagnosis and can, really assist a patient without having them travel. And then more recently, even in Jamaica, and I say even, I really say that loosely because one of the things that we know is that as a Caribbean people, we're not last in anything. We might not shout it at the top of the mountaintops every day, but we are doing things across the region that are quite innovative and even leading globally. We're not afraid to try things. So just about 2 weeks ago, one of our private hospitals in Jamaica implemented a laparoscopic surgery instrument. So it will allow them digitally to do surgeries. And, laparoscopic is going to take a camera into the inside of the stomach, for example, and the surgeon is able to complete his surgery using the vision from that camera. Now, why that was important is it's a private hospital, really, in Jamaica that brought it in. But the previous method relied on a nurse to stand and hold an earlier version of that camera. And so she would stand and hold while the surgeon is doing his work. And they had to time the surgery so that it had to be complete within a certain time because we've worked out the statistics around how long she can actually have precision holding that device. And so we've removed that human component, given some AI in there, and having now the surgeries completed with great levels of success, using that digital device with the AI support and pushing through more surgeries, in a shorter period of time. So I say that to say that, everything that's imaginable, there's a ton of hardware out there. And as we would have said, we need to now have the software tools support all this myriad of hardware and put it together to make a process.
I will get to that. So the cost of the hardware, is it going down? Is it coming up? Do you have options? Is there competitive space? What's the...
Yeah, the cost of the hardware is headed in the right direction. So it's constantly been becoming lesser and lesser expensive. Now there may be some new devices. So for example, if you look in AI, the processors, the GPUs required for running AI, those are a higher cost because they're a short commodity right now. But over the next 5 years, we can expect that the price of that will also come down. But overall, if you look at the computers, look at medical instruments, look at connectivity, the cost has been going down in all these areas. And I just want to echo what Carol's saying as well. I've looked at several hospitals, old and new, and especially the newer hospitals in terms of the hardware requirements, their networking, the PC infrastructure, the medical devices they have, they're all being put together really well. So I think the Caribbean's doing a great job of creating its new infrastructure.
Excellent, excellent. Harold, you touched on it. So you can make your point and then you can move into talking about the software.
All right.
So make your point and then you can continue.
The point I was about to make was the integration of wearables. So most persons, it's now second nature to have some sort of a smartwatch and to have yourself monitored. And as we segue into the software side of things, it's no longer as it was 5-6 years ago, where persons were very skeptical about digital health and their information being accessible on a device or a wearable. It's now quite accepted. So from a software perspective, people are actually expecting now to see this kind of technology involved in their healthcare. That mystic environment, that fear is definitely subsiding at a rapid rate. Now, in implementing software, you have the software that will support those devices and that will capture the data from those devices and make them available. But then we are coming now as a region to an understanding that all valuable electronic health record is a requirement, because it doesn't matter how many tools you have and how much data you're collecting. If you don't have anywhere to put it and to be able to use it, learn from it, and recall it when that patient is in front of you, whether they're there physically or digitally, then all of that data gathering is basically of no use. And so the electronic health record is where most of our governments now are looking, our public sector, public healthcare systems are looking to start their journey. And that's a good place to start. What I found is that, and let me step back a bit. I've got on the I am CNW business badge, and a lot of times when I have conversations with persons, they say, so why is Cable and Wireless having this conversation with me around healthcare? And I said this last year, I'm going to say it again. If you talk to me for too long, you must get my favorite story that Cable and Wireless brought the telephone to Jamaica 8 years after Alexander Graham Bell patented the technology. And I love to talk about that simply because it demonstrates the fact that we don't wait for people to walk on the street with placards and say, I want the telephone. We are the ones who are going to bring the technology and then help people to acquire it. And I think that over the 150 plus years that we have been in the region, that continues to be our method. And we do a lot of this. We heard a lot of conversation today about partnerships and the need for partnership and collaboration. That has been our method over the years. And so we are constantly collaborating and working with partners to bring technology to the region. And so we've moved from the infrastructure, we've done data center, we've done networking, cybersecurity, and now we're coming up the stack and getting closer to the critical parts of the application layer. And we're getting into critical industries such as healthcare. So that's why we're having the conversation. So in working with and exploring partnerships around electronic health records and other types of software, what I found is that there's a lot, just like hardware, there's a lot of good software out there. But just like anything else, just like any one of us in the room, we have our specializations. We're all good at something. There's no masters of everything in here. And I find a similar thing in each of these software tools that are available. They all do something very well, and they do the other things okay. And we tend to look towards our developed nations for the best practices, etc. And attempts that I've seen over the years to implement these solutions in the Caribbean have not necessarily been so successful because of one major thing, and that is the Caribbean culture. It's been very difficult to take a very good software developed elsewhere, bring it into the Caribbean and have it accepted, because our doctors, our physicians, our medical practitioners are specialized, very good at what they do, and sometimes we bring these tools in that do not complement their skill set or the way that they work. And so we've had a challenge in that regard, and also we've had challenges in that those very good pieces of software are extremely expensive and more expensive than the region can afford. Any nation by itself can afford, and probably even, even if we were to combine, they're very, very expensive. And so they see us as a small market, and they're not necessarily even interested in coming to help us. So those are some of the issues that we experience with software. It's definitely out there, but attaining it and being able to have something that we can implement and that is sustainable, because there have been donations of software. Software has been purchased, it has been installed. We quipped about software being installed in other languages and therefore rendering it unusable. So we have that full gamut of a challenge from a software perspective. Let me stop there for a minute, I'll put a pin in it.
So, no, you did good, and we appreciated that. So, Shub, you are running a company,
Yes.
Newfields Technology, which specializes in a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
So tell us about that and your points of view on it, and also tell us about your ideas of how we can build capacity within the Caribbean to produce the software, mitigate the cost, and so on.
Yeah, and I want to build upon what Carol was saying, and thank you for recapping some of those anecdotes. And I do want to say, and I'm a software development professional predominantly, I will architect the hardware for you and give specifications, but software is what we do. And I want to also mention that most of, if not all, the project failures that we have are because of the software. So, and again, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, even the Caribbean does a very good job of the infrastructure and networking. You may have issues, but they overcome them. All the failures you hear about where millions of dollars are wasted, or a platform is unusable, or a government or a hospital spent money on it, but the healthcare professionals don't use it, they're all lacking on the software side. So I think the one thing that as a region in the Caribbean, we have to develop an understanding and appreciate is that software development is a very essential feature. In fact, even if you look at, I'll just digress just a bit, but in a related manner. We were talking about some of the challenges yesterday, I heard in some of the talks about how telecom is providing the infrastructure. That's what's critical. That's what passes all the messages. But most of the economy, the digital economy, and most of the earning now is on the OTT front, whether it's WhatsApp or it's Meta or all these other companies. Now, these are all software companies, right? So one of the things and even if you have a PC or even if you have an iPhone, so an iPhone, Apple makes a lot of money from iPhone, but you should see the revenue on the apps. They take 25% of every single app transaction, right? That's where the money and the digitization in the economy also is. So I think as a region, we have to give a lot more focus to software. And when we come over there to what you were saying, Carol, I've seen examples of that where a software from UK or from Asia will be brought over, and then you have to go through 20 or 30 screens, which people don't understand.
Yes.
So guess what? The medical records people will staff up, and the admin people will do it. The doctors will be like, listen, I'm not touching this. I got to save lives. Yeah. And who would blame them, right? I wouldn't blame them. It's because it should be intuitive. So the main thing that we have to realize for software is that we have to customize it. It has to be bespoke. It has to be customized to the Caribbean system, to the specific hospital, to the way people work over here. And that's where we've had a lot of our success. I shall remember the first major Caribbean project we did. We did a large hospital, and when we got the project, I insisted that we will fly down. I'll fly down with my analysts and engineers. So first they were like, why do software engineers need to come here? And I said, who do you want to meet? I said, well, I want to meet the doctors and the nurses and the hospital staff. And they were perplexed by it, but they were good enough to accommodate us. And when we sat in that session, the doctors and nurses were there. They were all tight-lipped, and they were like, well, I got to get back to my work. And about 10 minutes in, they were like, wait a second, you're asking us what the system should look like? I said, yes, we want your inputs. They're saying, why? I said, because that's the way we'll make it. And then the whole room got excited. They got really involved. And believe me, when we showed them a month later, when we showed them all those customizations, they were excited about it. And the main thing was that they felt it's their system. Right? And when we went live, there was 100% adoption within the first week. And they trained each other. Yep. So that's the kind of success we can achieve, but it'll come from focus on software and from customizing it to the region and getting that local element into it, which is very, very important.
I'll pick up on that. The key to a successful, or it's not a successful, the key to successful transformation is people. Your outcomes are best if you start your transformation process by understanding and including or incorporating the participation of your teams, the teams who actually execute those processes. Give them the opportunity to have a say, because not only do you get great ideas and you get great points around process improvement, but you also get persons who are feeling that they are a part of the process. Yes. And by feeling that they're a part of a process, you know, the HR people will know that they said the number one thing for us is we want to feel like we belong. And the minute we feel like we belong, we're going to give everything we have. Now, when you feel like you belong and you're a part of this transformation process, you're going to own it. And it's not going to fail, because everybody is sold and bought in and invested. So that strategy is definitely the go-to for a successful transformation, whether we're talking about healthcare or we're talking about any other form of digitization. Involve the people.
Absolutely. And if you break it down just quickly, so we talk about technology. So technology we have a good handle on, or it's accessible. Then there's process and people. So people, process, and technology. I think the areas where we need to focus on the process, because the way the software operates and the local culture, that's the process part of it.
Absolutely.
And then the people is actually the most critical part. We have to involve them. And to just touch upon what you're talking about mentoring, so digitization, engineering, software, coding, all these are growth areas. And every region has a desire to develop their knowledge and develop the expertise in this area. Now, if you compare, we work in the US, in India, and in the Caribbean. And definitely the Caribbean is not quite there as the US and India. It's no surprise, right? But I truly believe the way to do this is, so there's two things. One, when we do a software project, even though it's being developed in India or in US, it has to be designed in the Caribbean. So we need local involvement. We need to design the processes, design the software, design the flows, has to be done locally. I think that's the magic which will make a lot of difference. And then if you want to develop the technology expertise locally, we must execute some of those projects here. Like the best way is to get a lot of smart engineers who have got high-end expertise, have them work here, and then the teams around them will pick up that knowledge, and we'll start off that local engine as well for software development.
Excellent. Let me use that now to dovetail in the sustainable piece, right? Yes. So we're going well. So how do we make this all sustainable? What needs to happen? What savings do you see going into arising from digitization that will probably go into preventative approaches to healthcare and so on? Remember where we started, right? Yeah. We are treating a lot of illnesses. We need to prevent more. But without me handcuffing you, speak to sustainability. Carol, do you want to start?
Yeah, I've got so much to say. A number of the projects that we see manifesting around the region, around these specialized areas, are funded projects. And one of the challenges of the funders is sustainability in the context of what happens at the end of the project. Is this system going to stay? How are we going to have it continue? How do we ensure continuity? But my other spin on sustainability is, as Shub said, when you use resources, technical skill set in the region, and you've developed your systems according to the requirements of the region, you have an advantage on sustainability because you do not need to depend on outside sources to keep your solution going. A lot of times there continues to be ongoing incremental costs when you go to the developed solutions, I'll call them those, that we can't manage, and that's something that often kills the project because we just can't fund it. But lastly, on sustainability, I want to posit a completely different thought process here around what is happening to our nations in general. So we spoke about non-communicable diseases, and we talked about chronic diseases. And the fact is, as I have been educated moving around the region and talking to various ministries of finance and ministries of health, that the cost of treatment in the region is skyrocketed. And we're actually at a point where treatment is unimaginably unaffordable. And so one of the motivating factors around us adopting a digital healthcare environment is around our economic stability. If we continue at the rate that we are going, our next generation of employees is at risk, even as they migrate to better things than a 9-to-5 job, such as, creatives on social media and the music industry and sports, which we're also fighting with. But we won't have a stable generation that we can employ. So what has to happen is that we need to get our existing health environment operating efficiently and cost effectively so that we can save money, but move some of that cost saving into preventative care rather than treatment. So the idea of educating persons around the causes of non-communicable diseases and how to detect and how to treat. And even simply the generations who already are suffering from these things, just reminding them to make their appointment, to attend their appointment, to take their medication when they're supposed to take it, goes a long way to preventing us getting back into this cycle of treatment. So it is a Caribbean national focus that we need to take.
Awesome. I'm going to give Shub the last minute.
Sure. So quickly about sustainability, right? So healthcare is so important. Healthcare is a challenge globally. Costs are rising globally. So I absolutely agree. In order to make healthcare and our economy sustainable, we have to get a handle on health, right? So now, in order to make the health, digitization can play a major factor. In order to make digitization sustainable, we have to be able to monetize it in such a way, so it needs to be an industry. It needs to be monetized so that the ongoing maintenance and running of that digitization, because one of the things, again, when you look at software, when you develop a software, it doesn't end there. It's like a continuum. You have to continue to update it, continue to upgrade it, continue to make changes to respond to customers. So I think there's an opportunity here, right? There's an opportunity for telecom to play an immense role. So and I think telecoms know how to recover from disasters, right? How to do data backups, how to do disaster recovery. That's something which this industry and the companies understand really well. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, our time has expired. I'm sure you enjoyed the panelists. I think they did a wonderful job, and let's just tell them thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our panelists. Carol Robertson, Senior Business Development Partner and Caribbean Government Lead C&W Business. Shub Singh, CEO, Newfields Technologies, and our moderator, Charles Douglas, Senior Manager, Regulatory Affairs, CWC. As we build our digital economies and sustainable digital economies, they will depend on the health of our people. So this conversation about how telecoms, our operators, our providers will help to facilitate the continued health of our people through technology was very important, and great discussion from our panelists. Let's give them another round of applause. So as we move into the last session of the day, we're moving well with time though. We've caught back up with some time. You didn't think it was possible, we've done it. So, just to point out, our headline sponsor, another round of applause for our headline sponsor, C&W Communications. Our gold sponsor, Brava, keep the applause going. And We Solve CX. Our silver sponsors, Bankai Group. Let me say it. Our silver sponsors, Bankai Group. Let me hear that round of applause. And Digicel. Our bronze sponsors, Alive also sponsored our coffee break today, Mavenair and Solution Box. This conference is not possible without the commitment of our sponsors. Our next session, and remember this evening, because the day at CANTO continues with a lot more excitement this evening with a networking event sponsored by our headline sponsors, CWC, and that will be in the Royal Foyer. Our next session is actually Digital Sustainability and Investment Challenges in the Caribbean, and we'll be having it in two parts. We'll start with our keynote from Karina Coburn, IDB Country Representative. And because we are in technology, we couldn't have a session without having someone come in on Zoom, because we're going to have Eduardo Shamali, Business Coordinator, Digital Transformation, CAF, joining us remotely for the discussion. We'll have Lucas Galito, Head of Latin America, GSMA, in the room, and that session is going to be led by Sebastian Kaplan, VP Government Affairs, Cable and Wireless. Let me check with our technical crew. Are we ready to proceed? We're ready. Is that a thumbs up? Oh, I'm not seeing so well out of my contacts. I think I need some technology with my contacts. Good. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we welcome our keynote speaker, Karina Coburn, IDB Country Representative. Hi, Karina. Is there a mic up there?
Remember that screeching sound it made while connecting? Not only was this very slow and more expensive as you had to pay by the minutes for service, but once connected to the internet, no calls could be received through the phone line, necessitating a different line for the internet or a choice between being connected to the internet or accessible by phone. Of course, now with the advent of broadband internet, these annoying little problems have gone away. As you know better than I, broadband internet provides fast connecting speeds that are many times faster than a traditional dial-up connection. Broadband can remain continuously connected to the internet without attracting any additional charges. Pricing is based on a monthly plan versus a per minute cost normally, and there are many unlimited plans available. Though we might not use landlines all that much anymore, we don't have to choose between being connected to the internet and making or receiving calls. Furthermore, broadband speeds have allowed us to access complex web pages with lots of graphics without any difficulty, to download photos and videos quickly and easily, and to purchase and download music online. There's free instant messaging and free voice over the internet services for phone calls. Additionally, broadband has evolved to the point where we can access education and health services at an affordable cost, work from home, and receive urgent information quickly. Just imagine how much more aware and prepared we were for Hurricane Beryl, 2024, than for Hurricane Gilbert, 1988. Is that when it was? 98? Okay. You remember. Of course, the speed with which information is accessible and disseminated carries with it significant risks, such as spreading misinformation or alt facts, mental health risks associated with the culture of being always on, always connected, and can even reinforce inequalities among socioeconomic groups. Those who are in a position to benefit from digitalization and those who are not, because they don't have ready access to the appropriate devices or to the internet. Okay. IDB research has shown that significant gaps in broadband access do exist across the Caribbean. This can be measured by comparing data on current coverage with that available in OECD countries. Factors such as the quality of service available and affordability are also considered. Among Caribbean nations, Barbados is estimated to have the lowest gap in fixed broadband at less than 1%, with Trinidad and Tobago, the Bahamas, and Suriname with 12.38%, 17.28%, and 17.58% respectively. These gaps are lower than the estimates for most countries across Latin America and the Caribbean, with the exception of Uruguay, which comes in at 4.58%. Jamaica, Belize, and Guyana all present fixed broadband gaps between 20 to 30%, with Haiti over 30%. Meanwhile, for mobile broadband, the gaps are much more significant. In the Caribbean, gaps range from over 40% in the Bahamas to over 70% in Barbados and Jamaica, and over 90% in Guyana, Belize, and Haiti. So, what does the existence of these gaps imply for public policy and digital transformation programs in the Caribbean? First, even while we roll out digital ID and interoperability programs, implement work-from-home policies for the public sector, and digitalize basic government services such as issuance of driver's licenses, passport applications, birth certificates, and citizenship documents, the reach and impact of these programs will be limited if key target groups just aren't able to access the internet reliably or fast enough. The collection of survey data on public use of online services is far too sparse for the region. And in those instances where data is collected, we see a compelling case for enhanced engagement with groups who are vulnerable to digital exclusion, such as the elderly or persons with disabilities, where the use of online services has been found to be 3 times less than the rate of the average citizen. Second, if the measure of success are individuals attending elite schools who can pay for private health care and have the resources to pay for unlimited broadband at home and on their phones, as well as big corporate entities, then we have missed the opportunity to leverage the power of digital transformation to achieve better social and economic outcomes for those in underserved and remote communities, and to drive small business development for inclusive economic growth. These communities and MSMEs will need affordable broadband access. Third, to properly leverage broadband service even when it is made available, it will be necessary to equip the population, regardless of their circumstances, with digital skills that allow them to effectively utilize digital tools and connectivity. This means a radical re-engineering of our learning ecosystems, platforms, and offerings to deliver world-class content, certify talent at a faster rate, and diversify the pool of ICT talent in our countries to become a shared resource and strength for the region. If the aim is to ensure that as many people as possible are able to participate in the digital revolution in progress and can gain access to the benefits of digitalization, it should be a priority for stakeholders to collaborate in planning and executing investments to close infrastructure gaps. IDB economists have proposed a capital expenditure estimation approach which converts the percentage point gaps in broadband infrastructure versus OECD I mentioned previously to an estimated dollar cost of the gap. Econometric models have also been developed to estimate the impact of closing the gap on GDP and productivity. For example, a 10 percentage point increase in digital infrastructure is associated with 3.2% higher GDP and 2.6% higher productivity, with the full impact to be realized over a 6-year period. I will not go into the details of this analysis here, but our findings indicate that the estimated cost of closing digital infrastructure gaps is relatively small, ranging from less than 1% of GDP in Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Bahamas, to 2.1% of GDP in Suriname. Meanwhile, the payoff in terms of cumulative GDP over time can be in the range of 6% for Suriname and the Bahamas, and 10% and above for Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, and TNT. So what is the next step for policymakers? What will it take to generate the investment to close digital infrastructure gaps from stakeholders in the right places and in the right ways? Our recommendation is that countries should prepare a detailed broadband infrastructure plan, which entails 4 steps or pillars. The first, forecasting the demands for citizens, MSMEs, and public institutions at the national level. Second, mapping and georeferencing the public institutions and municipalities that are part of local government. Third, determining the technical specifications related to connectivity, depending on the location and density of the population. And fourth, estimating the capital expenditure and socioeconomic impact associated with the deployment of the infrastructure. While these infrastructure plans are being initiated, work is already taking place to build capacity at the local level. We heard about some of the efforts in Jamaica from Minister Vaz yesterday and from Minister Cattle this afternoon. Using Trinidad and Tobago as an example, the digital connectivity landscape reveals significant challenges, but also vast opportunities for growth. Remember, TNT has a gap in fixed broadband of 12.38 percentage points and a gap in mobile broadband of 86.34 percentage points when compared with the OECD average. This gap underscores a critical need for strategic upgrades to unlock potential and drive sustainable growth. A prime example of turning challenges into opportunities is the Connected ARIMA project, which the IDB is spearheading along with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and other stakeholders. ARIMA is a borough in East Trinidad, and the project is the brainchild of the Member of Parliament, who is also the Minister of Planning and Development, the Honorable Penelope Beckles. Launched in March 2022, Connected ARIMA is a comprehensive urban regeneration project, which is creating a smart community where digital technologies seamlessly meet the needs of citizens and businesses alike. The project is setting a precedent with over 90 e-services planned, making Connected ARIMA a benchmark for digital service delivery. As part of this initiative, high-speed fiber optic cable has already been installed in the ARIMA General Hospital and along the main thoroughfares to the town center. This provides the backbone for fixed and mobile broadband. Public Wi-Fi will be available free of charge to the community, and the route is already lit by LED lights installed by the power utility. The entire network has battery backup power, as well as 3 standby power generators and a large fuel tank. The server rooms are also distributed in 3 separate locations for security. A landing page is now being developed for the public Wi-Fi, and the system will be made available to the citizens of ARIMA within the coming weeks. The hospital, the security forces, the borough, and merchants in the area are ready to leverage the Wi-Fi network and have already made plans in this respect. In parallel, detailed designs are being prepared for civil works and other investments to enhance the town center and the nearby First Nations village of the indigenous people resident in ARIMA. The project will enhance governance and citizen welfare while also promoting a sustainable model for future urban development, showcasing the power of collaborative efforts among government agencies, local authorities, and international organizations like the IDB. The project also benefits from extensive stakeholder feedback from a public perception SMS survey and public consultations with the business community and the First Nations Indigenous group, ensuring that the project's direction truly reflects the community's needs and preferences. Consequently, the local business chamber has committed to covering the recurrent costs of public Wi-Fi in the shopping district. There are a number of smart city initiatives at various stages of implementation across the Caribbean. Similar to the Connected ARIMA project, these leverage digital infrastructure investments to meet the nuanced needs of diverse communities and to enhance the services they can access from public and private actors. When developed with the buy-in of the community, smart city solutions help decentralize service delivery and improve the citizen experience in an effective and sustainable way. Other practical solutions to be considered include the use of TV white spaces, often referred to as super Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi on steroids, to reach remote and hard-to-reach areas. Unlike traditional Wi-Fi, which struggles with short range and barriers like walls and trees, white spaces operate in a lower spectrum band. This allows signals to travel further and better penetrate obstacles, thus having the potential to revolutionize digital infrastructure. Experts predict that TV white spaces could eventually support a $100 billion ecosystem of devices and services, surpassing even the Wi-Fi industry. For example, TV white space brings connectivity to local communities around Loch Ness and the Isle of Bute in Scotland. Microsoft has also laid out an ambitious plan to plug the rural broadband gap using TV white space to provide broadband connection to 23.4 million Americans living in rural communities. In addition, governments are exploring the use of data cooperatives, data lakes, and data embassies during the digital transition to support e-identity and interoperability initiatives. This reflects the fact that there is a role for regional cooperation and coordination in building out digital capabilities. The concept of the data embassy, for example, involves placing a set of servers that store one country's data and are under that country's jurisdiction in another country to enable continuity in situations where governing from within the country's borders is no longer an option. This could arise from threats such as natural disasters, large-scale cyber attacks, and military invasion. Speaking of cyber attacks, it is essential that the appropriate infrastructure be developed to support a robust cybersecurity response within each country, complemented by supporting legislation and regulations. This has the added benefit of generating significant income for the economy, as the global cybersecurity industry now has an estimated value of over $200 billion. Recently, a regional cybersecurity operations center was launched in Trinidad and Tobago by a private firm with IDB support, which provides subscription-based cybersecurity monitoring to businesses and government agencies at an affordable rate. This provides the first line of defense against the increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks being deployed by threat actors. The TNT government has also introduced a cybersecurity investment tax allowance, which will allow companies to claim tax credits of up to the equivalent of about US $75,000 on the basis of their investment in cybersecurity software or monitoring equipment. At the IDB Group, our newly approved institutional strategy, the Impact Plus framework, envisages digital connectivity as a pivotal element in fostering innovative technology-based services. In alignment with the strategy, the IDB Group will support Latin America and the Caribbean in designing public investment, policy, and regulatory frameworks to crowd in private investment. We will also support better digital skills strategies to improve digital inclusion, the productive use of digital connectivity, data gathering, storage, and computing processing infrastructure. These objectives are also reflected in the IDB's One Caribbean framework, which will support the preparation of the national broadband connectivity plans I mentioned earlier through grant financing. The IDB Group consists of 3 windows. IDB, which provides long-term financing, research, and advice to the public sector. IDB Invest, which provides development financing and advisory services for large private companies. And IDB Lab, which provides seed capital and grants for experimental businesses and MSMEs. We are eager to collaborate with governments, private sector entities, and other actors to finance strategic investments in digital infrastructure to establish digital identification systems, expand service coverage, and modernize existing networks. In fact, IDB Invest has financed 4G LTE and fiber optic deployment in Costa Rica and Argentina, smartphones and digital services in Chile, Colombia, and Peru, and fiber optic network expansion in Brazil. Discussions on similar projects are underway in Guyana, Barbados, and Mexico. Through technical assistance and advice, we can support the updating of regulatory frameworks to support digital innovations and reduce barriers for new entrants. Moreover, we can help to structure public-private partnerships to enhance the reach and quality of digital infrastructure projects. Indeed, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder collaboration will be vital to truly achieving and sustaining digital transformation efforts. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share today. Thank you for staying awake. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Karina Coburn, IDB country representative. She has set the stage for our conversation to continue, which will be led by our moderator, Sebastian Kaplan, VP Government Affairs, Cable and Wireless. He will be joined by Lucas Galito, Head of Latin America, GSMA, and we will be joined remotely by Eduardo Shamali, Business Coordinator, Digital Transformation, CAF. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you. Thank you, Master of Ceremonies. Thank you to CANTO for the invitation. Thank you for staying for the last panel, for staying so long. Thank you, appreciate it. And take the opportunity to express our gratitude to all of those that are working behind the scenes for the effects of Hurricane Beryl. So really wanted to mention that. We're very, very grateful to all of them. Let's get into the conversation. Thank you, Karina, also for setting the scene. I'm excited. We have a wonderful panel here with Lucas and Eduardo to continue talking about digital infrastructure. Well, Karina already mentioned many issues that we can discuss on the panel, but definitely there's a connectivity gap in the Caribbean. In general, demand for data usage in the region is growing year after year, 30–50%. This will demand more investment from the MNOs. Is there a problem to guarantee the efficiency and future sustainability of the networks in the Caribbean? If so, why, and what would be the consequences? What do you think, Lucas?
Well, thank you, Sebastian. I want to thank you also, CANTO, for the invitation. I want to thank also my colleagues from GSMA North America for having me here. And I will try to give a perspective from Latin America, which I think also work also for the Caribbean. This particular question that you ask, I mean, it's not only relevant to the Caribbean, there are discussions around it in several parts of the world, and Latin America is not an exception. And it is interesting what you just point out, because you've been talking about traffic growth. And it is interesting because some people, especially on the OTT side, has been saying, you know, like, traffic is not growing anymore at those big rates. And let me share with you some numbers. You know, by 2023, the traffic that went through all the mobile networks in Latin America were 15 exabytes, and we expect by 2030 to raise up to 44 exabytes. So if you take into account, or if you consider the amount of megabytes or the exabytes that will go through the mobile networks in Latin America, every year we are carrying more traffic than the year before. So is traffic traffic growing less in Latin America? No, it is growing, and it's growing more year after year. And when we think about, and we are almost finishing a report for Latin America, and we share with the community in the last M360 in Mexico the preliminary results. When we double click on who are generating that traffic, 3 companies in Latin America are responsible for 80% of the traffic, and only 1 for 50% of the traffic. So what we see is there is no incentive for these companies to be efficient in the use of a public scarce resource as mobile networks. Why? Well, because basically the price to carry that traffic is 0. So, are there good guys and bad guys in this discussion? Are they bad guys? No, not at all. They're just economic agents that are reacting to the incentives in a very predictable way. You know, if the price is 0, they have no incentive in being efficient in carrying those traffics. And you ask me about consequences, if there will be consequences. Well, of course there are consequences, like everything everything in technology and in economics, there are consequences. So you either deal with more congestion, or you invest more in network capacity to deal with that traffic, or both. I mean, you expect more congestion, and you have to invest more and in expanding those the networks net capacity. And I think Chairman yesterday in the opening made it very, very clear. You know, it is fair that those large traffic generators should somehow contribute to the expansion of that network. And sometimes we think that the digital future is something that will happen anyway. And we don't see it that way from GSMA. I mean, digital future needs to be built, digital future needs to be developed, and it is relevant that we, especially moving forward, we need to eliminate those obstacles that are preventing that is preventing the public networks to be used in a very efficient way. But not only for the benefit of ISPs, but for the benefit of the community and the benefit of the users.
Great. Thank you, Lucas. Now off to Eduardo. Eduardo is joining us remotely. Hi, Eduardo. Off to you.
Hi, Sebastian. Hi, all. Thank you for the invitation, and CANTO, Sebastian, all of there. Sorry, I haven't been able to travel, but very delighted to share with you some insights regarding this important question. Well, Sebastian, I'm going to talk about 4 main problems and the consequences regarding this important question that you put on the table. One of the main questions regarding the Caribbean, Latin America also, is the significant digital divide. As you told, digital divide in Latin America and the Caribbean affected 64% of the rural population and 40% of the lowest income urban households. So in this scenario, the Caribbean also has unique geographical challenges, with many small islands spread across a large area, making infrastructure deployments expensive and logistically complex. And in the third scenario, we have also structural barriers that include not only economic constraints, but also natural disasters, which are more frequent in the Caribbean, disrupting infrastructure and increasing maintenance costs. The second element to put on the table is the insufficient investment in telecommunications. Generally, in Latin America and the Caribbean, the investment in telecoms is significantly lower, probably 3 times that in more developed regions like Europe or North America. Particularly, rural areas and smaller islands face deployment costs that are up to the double those of urban areas, making them less attractive for private investment. The third element is the low demand and reduced revenue potential. In rural and less economical developed areas, even with coverage, the adoption of rate is low due to affordability issues and the lack of digital literacy. Another interesting question is that the ARPU in the Caribbean is significantly lower than in developed countries. So in critical scenarios, when this ARPU is about sometimes 10 times lower, impacting the sustainability of network investments. And the last and not least is the higher cost of capital if you think as a private investor. So the cost of capital in the Caribbean is higher due to perceived risk, economic instability, and smaller market sizes. So here telecommunication companies face higher interest rates and less favorable financial conditions compared to developed regions, which affects their investment capacity. So the context and consequences in this scenario is very critical. So if we don't not advance to new public-private arrangements and some scenarios to foster investments and also to foster the demand potential, we are in a complex scenario and we will just only should to rely or be based on mobile deployment, but we will lag behind regarding the fixed connectivity that the digital economy of the future requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Definitely, the problem is there. There's the layout of a problem. Now going to the solutions. What changes should be considered to implement schemes that incentivize and guarantee continued investment initiatives and the networks in the Caribbean? How to reconcile the interests of different actors and users? Eduardo, you want to start? What
Perfect.
do you think?
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, here also I will name four elements. The first one, I think I also started with it, is to promote public-private partnerships. We must encourage collaborations between governments and private sector to share risks and pool resources for the digital divide. We already saw some examples in Jamaica between digital and the government to expand rural connectivity, also in the Bahamas, for example, to improve infrastructure, and also some interesting thing regarding public and private partnerships is that this can facilitate the access to international funding and technical expertise from development banks. Second factor is to improve policies and regulations. In general, governments should reduce regulatory and fiscal burdens to make the business environment more attractive for investors. You also have to implement policies, and here talking about risks. Again, risks that are the ones that increase the cost of capital, right? Regarding what happens with climate change, disasters, just to foster and share the risk with the private sector to foster these investments. Also, we should try to explore innovative finance model. Universal service funds are not working in general. So we should try to improve financial models that incorporate social and financial sustainability, such as blended finance, combining public, private, and also philanthropic funds. Of course, the MDBs, we have also a very important role in this scenario, and we have to explore new approaches to the digital projects in order to foster not only the deployment infrastructure, but also to foster the demand. And in that scenario, the third point is to improve the training and development of digital skills. Literacy programs to increase the effective use of networks, particularly in rural areas. For example, we have an example regarding the Digital Jam initiative in Jamaica, which aims to improve digital skills among young and foster entrepreneurship. And also, again, but not least, improving risk-sharing mechanisms. develop mechanisms to distribute risk among different stakeholders, such as risk guarantees or insurance schemes, regional cooperation frameworks to mitigate risks and share best practices across the Caribbean nations. And for example, here, the NDBs can play a pivotal role in coordinating regional efforts and providing financial instruments to reduce this investment risk. Thank you, Sebastian.
Great, thanks, Eduardo. A lot to do. Lucas, what should we do?
Well, if I knew the answer, Sebastian, I wouldn't be here probably. But I mean, there are a lot of things going on. You know, as I said, you know, this topic is not only quite hot in the Caribbean, but it's also in Latin America. You know, Brazil is probably taking the lead. There were 2 public consultations this year. It is expected by the end of this year, by Q4, there will be a draft proposal of regulation. We are working closely with the regulator. Now, the like funding future networks or investment gap, you know, the way you want to call it, is also in the regulatory agenda in Colombia. You know, so there is momentum around this, and actually governments, countries are worried about, okay, how are we going to fund next generation of networks? You know, it's quite interesting. I don't know if the example is appropriate, but you know, for example, in the aero commercial industry, in the past we used to cross the Atlantic in less than 3 hours with the Concorde. Now it's taking twice. It's probably one of the few examples in the world where the technology has been going forward, to put it in a way. So we should not underestimate what could happen with futures networks. We need to find sustainable ways to fund 5G, 6G, and whatever Gs are coming. So as I said before, it is critical to eliminate those obstacles that today prevents the efficient use of networks, and to incentivize that negotiation between large traffic generators and ISPs. I think a couple of months ago, I was attending a conference, and I like a phrase that I heard there, that it was like the era of romantic internet is over. You know, now we need to be a little bit more pragmatic, understand what are the models, understand how net neutrality should be interpreted, especially for next generation services, which is actually are focused in network slicing and in giving different type of services. You know, so I think that's an interesting approach. I think Eduardo mentioned the contribution to the Universal Service Fund. Let's do some history. You know, in the past, the USF were the companies that contributed to the USF were the telecom operators. You know, and somehow they were the same economic agents that benefit from that contribution, because that money was used to expand telephony in remote areas. So as the use of universal service funds moved towards expanding mobile broadband, the economic agents that contribute to the USF are the same operators that used to contribute in the past. But who are the economic agents that now are benefiting from the expansion of mobile broadband? Well, the broad mobile ecosystem. So probably now is the discussion if all the agents within the economic, within the mobile broadband or the broadband ecosystem should be contributing to universal service funds, and that is a discussion that is happening in the US. And of course, then there are other ingredients, like for example, spectrum. You know, like using spectrum as a tool for inclusion and not to get revenue for the government. Having tax structures that are compatible with more investments. I mean, are we advocating for no taxes for the industry? No, not at all. We recognize that the government needs money to focus on their objectives, but we need to understand what are the most efficient tax structures that are compatible with more investment. So I don't know if that is the recipe for the success, but at least some ideas where we could work in the future.
Great. Thank you, Lucas. There's a large menu to choose from. Well, we're almost there. I heard interesting concepts. I heard funding networks, negotiation, union neutrality, digital skills, policy and regulation, PPP. What about closing remarks? If you had to summarize in 30 seconds. Eduardo, if you're still there, have you left us or? Technology is working. Well, Eduardo, I know he had to attend another meeting. He was right short in time. But Lucas, how do you closing remarks in 30 seconds? So what would you say? What would you suggest?
I would say, I mean, if we take into account the world population now, we were able to connect 50% of the world to the benefits of broadband. So how do we connect the next 50%? But probably what brought us here might not work to connect the other 50%. So we need to understand how we can think out of the box, how we can reshape the policy, how we can work in models that can focus in funding next generation networks and understand, you know, how current policies like net neutrality, for instance, could be reshaped in order to be able to somehow make the next generation of networks work.
Interesting. A new world for a new internet.
New world for a new internet.
Eduardo, closing remarks.
Thank you, Sebastian. Well, as I told you, the main two ideas here are innovation and adaptability. We have to explore further these public-private partnerships, this evolution, also to have an evolution regarding the regulatory frameworks, the investment rules, how funds are also generated to have input to these connectivity challenges. I think Lucas was very clear about it. We have to think again about what do we need for the future. And also, we have to have a conviction of shared goals. And these shared goals have to involve governments, private companies, civil society, and of course, we have already some successful case studies and best practices, but they are not enough. And once we advance in this digital divide process, the challenge is going to be harder and harder. So we have to explore and take advantage of new technologies. We have to be neutral in the approach. And I really believe that scenarios like 5G, what is going to happen on the revolution of satellite communications will drive all these initiatives forward. So let's stay open and to share for new partnerships and for the MDBs from CAF, count with all the desire to inspire new funding mechanisms to make this investment available for all the projects in each of the scenarios, local, international, rural, in difficult areas. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Eduardo. Well, I think I bring two concepts, rethinking, reshaping the future one, and the other one, working together, partnership. I will highlight those. Well, we're running out of time, and we are separating everybody from the cocktail reception. So again, thank you very much, Eduardo, for participating. Thank you, Lucas. Please, round of applause for them. It's been a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sebastian Kaplan, for moderating that session. Great discussion on digital sustainability and investment challenges in the Caribbean. We have to be rethinking and reshaping the future. As Lucas says, the era of the romanticism of the internet is over.